Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming for another of our Flash Science Fiction Nights at Space Cowboy Books here in Joshua Tree. I'm your host, Jean-Paul, and tonight we have a wonderful lineup of Flash fiction authors for you. We're going to get the evening started with Jiang. Jiang is a Chinese-Canadian writer and immigrant from Fujian. She is a member of HWA and SFWA. Her work is appeared or is forthcoming in fantasy and science fiction, The Dark, Pseudopod, Prairie Fire, Hobart Pulp, The Master's Review, and her debut novella, Ling Woon, is forthcoming from Dark Matter Inc. Tonight, she's going to be reading 5 drabbles, which are 100-word stories, if you're not familiar with those. Flicker and Watch, Sold to Clean, I Hope to Grow, Not Your Father, and Dwelling Within and Without. Without further delay, I will hand it over to to read her drabbles.
Hello, everyone. All right, the first one, Flicker and Watch. Your eyes wander out the building's windows, looking down on those who stare and continue staring at the screens making up this tower's exterior walls. The digital ads that run 24/7 are not of your making, but they come from your imagination. Behind you, like ants, your employees work until they go blind. Each in a small cubicle, hunched over 3 monitors, brain churning, multitasking, drawing from your every thought. Like an octopus, metal arms suction onto your shaved head, and as the screened exteriors of other buildings flicker, you get a taste of your own darkest fears and lustrous desires. Second one, Sold to Clean. Mister's job is to clean. He scuttles through the office building 3 times a day, sometimes more, always on call. With his cleaning cart, he whisks down the halls, weaves along cubicles, wiping desks with spilt coffee, removing leftovers from 3D printed meals, and mopping up dried urine when the workers forget they are human, which is more often than one would expect. When he returns to his office each night at the basement of the building, he curls up with dreams of someday leaving his job, having a wife, maybe kids, but it's impossible because he sold the company his life. The third one, I Hope You Grow. I hold you to my bare chest when you finally meet the world. You haven't yet seen me with your eyes still closed, but I know you know me. Soon they will take you to the analysis machine in the hospital, sort you to your future role in society. And the only times I'll get to see you will be through progress photos as you age. You will become an adult not knowing your parents, like the rest of us, and that is okay. And then they take you from me, telling me that you won't be sorted. You're dead. Fourth one, Not Your Father. They stopped allowing unscheduled visits when people started living in the graveyard. After the funeral, you visit your father twice a week, making sure to sign up for the same 9 a.m. slot on Tuesdays and Fridays when bookings open at midnight on Sundays. At his grave, your father's hologram flickers, standing in front of his tombstone. Some have conversations with their dead, memories programmed into the holograms, but you sit next to the ghost of your father until time's up. See you next time. He stares after you, unblinking, unalive, not your father, but you refuse to believe it. Last one, Dwelling Within and Without. They compare us to cockroaches, rats, call us sewage dwellers. They consume the waste. We consume the waste they lay upon the earth and expel water in return, clear, glistening, drinkable. Underground, we roam in the dark, sometimes drinking in the daylight through metal bars above, but never do our bodies see it in full force. And when we pass, those who walk the ground above us take no notice in our silent deaths, as we collapse to our knees, sometimes holding hands, sometimes alone, and become the water running through their taps, sips they take from bottles, the tears falling from their eyes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, for sharing your drabbles. Next up, we have Renan Bernardo. Renan is a Brazilian science fiction and fantasy writer. He's published in Apex Magazine, Escape Pod, Solarpunk Magazine, and Space Cowboy's very own Simultaneous Times podcast. In 2021, he was one of the selected in the Imagine 2200 Climate Fiction Contest. Tonight, he's going to be reading 5 questions for the monthly routine check of FTL Drive Chief operators. Over to you, Renan.
Thank you. So just a disclaimer that this story is in an unusual format. It's in the form of a professional examination. And it's going to be published at OnSpec later this year, OnSpec magazine. So let's go. Question 1. FTL is only possible at high costs. Which option might affect the work of an FTL drive operator? A. Overexposure to the drive-generated radiation, which might increase one's risk of developing a set of diseases and neurocognitive disorders. B. Physiological and cardiovascular conditions due to the prolonged hours of EVA for drive maintenance. C. Isolation and distance. The ship's cantinas are all the same antiseptical plastic-coated holes with bland printed dough for lunch. No trace of the moqueca one might prepare for a daughter on Sunday afternoons. D. Hallucinations with a girl left fatherless and unreachable on Earth, abandoned by an FTL drive chief operator who stared at the stars for too long. Question 2. Since part of the drive resides outside the ship, EVA is necessary. Pre-briefing pure oxygen is advised before wearing EVA equipment. What's the recommended duration of this practice? A. 1 minute. The time it took for the readouts about the FTL drive failure sink in one's mind. B. 60 minutes. The time one spends every day muttering words of love and longing to a looping video of departure. The operator's daughter was giggling that day, a 10-year-old delighted at the sight of a spaceship, naively believing in a father's promises of coming back within 2 years. C. 5 Earth years. The time operators and miners took to realize they weren't expanding human presence across the universe, weren't doing anything the pretty worded company's leaflet stated. You were sacrificing for cost contingency. D. Forever. Question 3. The AI machines in a mine sand vessel can accomplish many things. What are they not able to do? A. To cure the compression sickness you have after you float outside to repair a ship that will never come back to Earth. B. To understand love, at least you are alike. C. To effectively replace Dora in one of the family simulation stations. D. To replicate warm embraces redolent with children's soap, crayon smelling fingers tickling the back of your neck, jiggles bouncing through the house. Question 4. One's desire to work in a mine sand vessel's FTL drive operations, however challenging the position, is motivated by A. Nothing. B. Hope that one day dwellers of a superior vessel might find the carcass of this place, a metal palace in the stars, and tell Dora that you have tried. You never intended to break a promise. C. Remorse for knowing you were a message away from resigning your position as chief operator. And still you proceeded. Still you wanted to bring Dora something other than parents fighting and a coffee stinking father with a distraught circles underneath his eyes and no time for playing. D. Fury, unrestrained, for archiving your resignation message before sending it, for not refusing to travel in a ship that you didn't trust, for smiling at Dora's peak over your desk, mouthing words of promise and love while the ship confirmed your credentials. Question 5. When is a chief operator allowed to jump back home? A. After traversing a 908 light years distance using the sublight engine. B. After realizing You never promised what you didn't know you could fulfill, except for once, in the launching station orbiting Mars, when you told Dora in a video call that you would be back before she turned 12, and you would bring an exquisite space stone for her. See, when you realize the vial sitting on your desk with the beryl glistening mineral will never get to Earth. And one day, like you, time will erode it. And having lost its shine, far from its place of origin, it will become rougher and rougher until all that remains are dry layers of cracks and crevices, frail to the touch. D. Only after shutting your eyes for so long that the after images from the black nauseating space outside your quarters window become that of home. Even if a disfigured version of it, smelling of sweat dampened skin-tight suits, where lives a blur-faced woman that grew up to be something entirely different than you will ever conceive. Option E, strictly after you open your eyes and realize you have one other option. You can override the drive's prime configs and assume the 58% risk of exploding yourself in photons and neutrons. FTL is only possible at very high costs. But once you overpaid them, you could always pay more. And even if that degrades your health like everything that isn't home, everything that doesn't smell like a daughter's embrace, it can still take you back, because you're bringing a piece of space for a child longing for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Renan. Next up, we have Dianne Dotson. Dianne is a science fiction and fantasy novelist and short story writer, science writer, artist, and busy mom of 2 teens. She is also the author of the Equestrian Saga, and I will drop links to both her website and that book in the chat. Without further delay, I will hand it over to Dianne.
Hi, thank you for inviting me, and thank you to everyone for being here. Void Mage. Gertie Hammond wandered down the railroad near her house, balancing upon slick silver track between red clay banks choked by kudzu. She was bored and she'd had a bad day. Time seemed stuck. She rather disliked being 14 and wanted to skip ahead to a time cliques didn't criticize her outfits, her face, or her family's lower income. Gertie chiefly wanted to write and draw, and she wanted a job that wasn't babysitting. She trudged along the tracks, writhing from the crushing embarrassment of falling on her knees at school, bursting her pants. She'd begged to stay home the next day, but her parents refused. Get back on the horse, they said. She preferred setting off on a heroic voyage, far from the shallow glints of teen queen's eyes. She picked up one of the granite rocks that lined the track and hurled it down into a ravine toward an old abandoned tin roof, buckled and warped over decades. Its tremendous metallic crash satisfied her. She threw another, alternating hands. Twang! That didn't dissuade her negative thoughts. It did, however, create a sonic disturbance that burst a fissure into the air above the track, and out of that fissure fell a person. He righted himself and skidded briefly in the granite gravel. Gertie stared. He was clad in raven iridescent indigo, with long spikes of hair lightning white at the roots and blue, black, purple at the ends. His outfit shimmered like living obsidian. Gertie felt as though a rock star had dropped before her. "Ah, good, you're here," he said, glancing toward her. The fissure in the air above him shimmered. "Come on then, before we're too late." "What?" said Gertie, feeling stupid, but excited. "Follow me." "Oh, yes, formalities." His stern brow softened. "I'm Delactin, Void Mage, and I need you to follow me. To save someone in the past, your future, and all that." Gertie, staring with owl eyes, said, "I'm sorry?" Delactin waved a fine-fingered hand and said, "No need for apologies. Unless you don't come, in which case then you'll want to apologize to the people in the past and future you could have saved. Didn't you ask for this? I seem to recall you're beseeching the universe for some sort of purpose. A job, yes? Well, guess what? You've got it, but only if we leave right now. You are Gertie Hammond. Yes? Yes, Gertie managed to say. Delatkin nodded and bowed. Nice to meet you officially. Let's jump into the sky. Gertie looked over her shoulder at shining tracks bending homeward where she would dread school. She marched up to Delatkin, noticed he smelled of something burning, but not unpleasant. She extended her hands and said, I hope I can trust you. I wouldn't be here if you couldn't, said Delatkin. Seizing her hands, he lifted her like a balloon, and they rose together into the shimmering rift above their heads. Gertie fainted. She woke briefly, tongue lolling, as Delatkin marched with her in his arms through swirls of violet and magenta nothingness, dotted with forks of blue lightning. Where are we? She asked thickly. Away from your mundane life. With a whistling sound that rose to a high pitch until silent to her human ears, the lights and swirls went away. She stood with Delatkin in a tower, glinting with violet-hued, diamond-paned windows. It felt like standing inside an amethyst. What is this place? Gertie asked. Delatkin said, This is my watchtower, from which you can see everything, past, present, future. Although the latter is amorphous, it melts as quickly as you encounter it. Like cotton candy, mused Gertie. Delatkin laughed. Ha, like cotton candy. Why did you bring me here? She wondered. I'm a nobody. You're anything but a nobody, Gertie Hemmons, said the mage. You might help anyone, anywhere. From here? She asked. From here, he said. He raised his arms. The violet diamond-shaped facets of the tower turned open. She could see through to different places and eras, some beautiful, some terrible. It's all a little tiring for me lately. You've got a malleable imagination. I think it's just right for you. Gertie swallowed. I actually have to go home for dinner, she said reluctantly. Delatkin laughed and pointed to one of the diamonds. Gertie could see her mother setting the table and looking irritated. She's probably wondering why I'm not helping, said Gertie, wincing. Delatkin said, well, then I'll take you back. But I can come back here? She asked, torn. He smiled and gestured around them. Here, there, and anywhere. But for now, home. He took her hand. She glanced at the brilliant sparkles of the tower's interior, realizing for a moment it resembled a lighthouse. But he pulled her back into the void space of swirling color. She found herself standing on the railroad. Delatkin stood beside her. Well, he said, throw the rock. Just the right frequency again, please. I don't want to end up with two heads or something. She stared and he laughed. Farewell. Until tomorrow? Yes, Gertie stammered. Tomorrow. Until then, Gertie Hemmons, I think you've got a brilliant future ahead of you. To cotton candy. So she reached down, grabbed a stone and threw it. Her aim was true. The metallic twang made her shudder. Delatkin's image wavered and with a small crack, he vanished. Gertie blinked, wondering if she had hallucinated everything. She walked slowly toward home until she heard her mother calling her name, and then she sprinted. Inside her home, Gertie panted. What took you so long? Asked her mother, exasperated. I got a job, Gertie said, beaming. A what? What kind of job? Gertie heaped food onto her plate and watched its steam rise in a little puff that looked suspiciously purple. Making cotton candy, she said impishly. Her mother shook her head. Is this one of your tales, Gertie? When do you start? Yesterday, today, and tomorrow, I think, said Gertie. Her mother laughed. As long as you're home in time for dinner. The end.
Thank you so much. That was Dianne Dotson with Void Mage. Before that, you heard Renan Bernardo with 5 questions for the monthly routine check of FTL Drive Chief operators. And opening the show was Jiang with 5 drabbles. Flicker and Watch, Sold to Clean, I Hope You Grow, Not Your Father, and Dwelling Within and Without. I want to thank all of our readers and our audience tonight, and I'm also going to drop a link in the chat for our next Flash Fiction Night, which is coming up on June 28th. We're going to have Cora Bullert joining us from Germany, Todd Sullivan joining us from Korea, and Gianna Bianchi joining us from Brazil. Thank you so much, everybody, and we hope to see you next time.